Hello again everyone, it's me MadameMacabre, and I've got a very interesting special kind of video to share with you guys today. So you may have noticed the recording here is cell phone quality. Unfortunately the video is going to be jumping from a couple different video sources for me to be able to do this video today, so you'll have to bear with me for that. But anyway, I'm in Washington State and we are still in the heart of lockdown. There's still not really anything you can go out and do, so I've noticed a lot of people using the time to learn new crafts and new skills, and I thought it would be kind of a fun opportunity for me to maybe share with you guys one of the skills I've got in a sort of walkthrough, so you can use this time to perhaps learn this new skill for yourself. And as I'm sure you put together from the title, today we're going to be covering how I do my custom homemade candles. I particularly use them to make spell candles that I put my own ingredients with my own intent, and I carve them and paint them, but realistically this can be done for any kind of candle for whatever need or use you have. But without further ado, I figure let's go ahead and jump on into this little impromptu tutorial. Okay, so for making candles, there is actually a lot of stuff you are going to need to get. So that is one of the harder parts about starting this hobby, is there's a decent amount of stuff you actually need to acquire. That being said, if you're able to order this stuff online, I'll go ahead and run through some of the basics you'll need. For today, we're gonna need, like for instance, we've got molds. Drop that. For my spell candles, use the 2 by 6.5 inch aluminum mold, but these come in all sorts of different sizes. You can get them wider for more classic pillar candles, whatever. But here's an example of what I'll be using. For the aluminum molds, you'll also want these little wick holders. They're going to be handy dandy for keeping your candle nice and even. It'll go up top like that and hold the wick in place. If you would like to do votives, like the little votive candles, you can get special molds just for them with these neat little things that have a spot just for the wick. So all you gotta do is pour directly in there and it will have a place left for the wick just for you. For pillar candles, I like to use the square braid cotton wick, and this is 5/0. And then for the little votive candles, you can actually, here we go, get these little wicks that are specifically for votive candles. I get these from a local candle supply factory called Swans. They actually ship all over the country, so they're not a bad deal. But anyway, you can get these ones. These are the ones that are for votives of 1 to 1.5 inch diameter, and these are the 2.5 inch wicks. And then next, of course, you're gonna need some wax if you're gonna be making candles. So this is the kind that I get, again, from Swans. This is where I get my stuff. I get blend 140, which I believe is a white beeswax mix, aka the forbidden chocolate bar. This big boy, I make a lot of candles, so I get a lot of wax. Now, if you're just starting to explore with it, you do not need to get this much. You can get much smaller amounts, and you can get things in bags of loose wax. You can get all sorts of different things, but for my purpose, I go with the big boy. I'm gonna have to break this down though, because this is a lot more than we need, but that's for later in this video. I think another thing that we're gonna need, again, more Swans, I get dye chips. Now these are interesting because they don't actually look anything like what the end color is going to be when they're in this form. This is mauve. It's going to be like a soft purple color, and that's what we're going for today's candles. But you put a couple of these in depending on how much wax you have, and it will actually, when it's all heated up in the melter, give you the color of the candle you desire. And then, of course, something handy dandy that you can get from any grocery store, a confectioner's or candy thermometer. These will actually go high enough to be able to properly measure the insane temperature that the wax gets to. And then there's just a couple more things. Let me grab them. Okay, and here's the rest of it. You will need a scale with a bowl like this. It can be these old analog ones, or it can be a digital one, whatever you have. That is for measuring your wax. You're gonna need a boiler. Now, this is a special candle specific boiler. There is another way that you can do these things by using a double boiler, which unfortunately, since I upgraded to this thing, I do not have the double boiler stuff anymore. So this tutorial will be using this. However, you can look up other tutorials and stuff on how to properly use a double boiler if you still wanted to follow along with using your own thing to heat up the wax, because everything other than the heating process is going to be relevant in this video. And then I use this stick for mixing the wax once I get the stuff in there so I can get nice even color and smell. And then the last little trick that I learned is to get a skewer. And this will come in handy later when we're pouring the candles. So that will come back up later in this tutorial. And of course, we're also going to need our scent for our candle. This one is an unmarked bottle because I made it myself. I got the components and I mixed them to a custom scent. You can do that if you want, or you can get ones that are completely pre-made if that's how you want to go. But for today's purposes, we are using a 1 ounce bottle. And since I'm going to be doing pillar candles, for pillar candles, you're going to want, for a 1 ounce bottle of smell, 2 pounds of wax. Speaking of wax, first things first, we gotta deal with the forbidden chocolate bar, because that's a lot of wax. We don't need all of it. So, what is the professional, true, correct way to deal with this? Beat it up. Okay, now that we're 100% certain our neighbors think we're even crazier than before, we can proceed to the next step. So now we are going to take some of this now pulverized forbidden chocolate and we're going to put it into our scale and measure out exactly 2 pounds of it. Okay, so now we have exactly 2 pounds of wax ready to go, so we can get ready for the next step, which will be preparing this bad boy. Now, if you're going to use a melting pot like the one I have, you need to be very careful. It's got a power source like this. Never, ever, ever run one of these things that has a little plug-in like this while it is empty. Never run it while it is empty. You're only ever going to want to run this thing when it is full of wax, because if you run it empty, this will burn out. It will be completely destroyed. And these things are not cheap. You are not going to be very happy if your $100 to $300 machine dies because you ran it empty or too little wax. Like, it's a problem. Never let it run dry. And it is also a fire hazard, so just keep that in mind. Only plug this thing in and turn it on when you have wax in there and you are ready to go. Okay, for this beastie, we are going to plug it in to the little thing here. Once you hear that little click, and you've got it plugged in to power. For today, we are going to dial this one to 150. So past warm. So about here. Now, 150 is where we're gonna wanna be for the tricks that I have learned. For doing these candles, you're gonna want to add the scent and add the color when the stuff is at 150 degrees. When you are ready to pour, you're gonna wanna turn it down a little bit more, down to 120. And this is where that candy thermometer is gonna come in handy. Okay, now that it is officially all melted down, we're gonna whip out our candy thermometer and we're gonna pop that bad boy in so we can get the temperature of the wax. Now, mind you, you're gonna try and have this hover above the bottom. You don't wanna actually touch the bottom of the pot because that'll mess with your temperature read. But what we're looking for is it being 150 degrees. And perfect. I feel like I'm making my life more difficult trying to do this with one arm, but here we go. We have our 1 ounce of scented oil that we're gonna go ahead and add to the cauldron. Talk about double toil and trouble, huh? Alright, and with that, we're gonna get our stir stick and we're gonna start mixing the scented oil in. That's one thing you guys can't get through the screen is it smells really good. So that is our scent. And next we're gonna add our color. Okay, so here goes chip number 1. Gonna go ahead and drop that in there. And already you can see it starting to melt away quite quickly. See that? You wouldn't have guessed that it's this purple color based on that almost yellowish packaging, but this is what one chip is gonna get you. Okay, so we are going to use some of our wick now, and we're gonna lace up our mold. So we're gonna take the wick, and we're just gonna go ahead and feed it through the hole in the bottom here until we can get it far enough along that we can grab it, pull it from the other side, like so. Now we're gonna want a little bit of extra just in case on each side. So on this top side up here, this is where this thing is gonna come in place, but I actually will do that second. So the first thing I'm gonna do is grab one of these plugs, and from the side that we have this stuff put in, we're gonna take our plug and we're gonna actually pop it right in there next to the wick. Now be careful not to push too hard because this aluminum can be rather sharp, and we don't want to actually cut the wick, because if you do push too hard, the wick will actually get cut off. So instead we're going to use around the plug, we're going to put that putty in there like so, all around, to keep it from leaking out. I like to roll the pieces kind of thin like that and then just squash them in there. So with that, we can now snip the extra. And now we're gonna flip over to this side. Okay, now with the remaining wick up top, we're gonna take our little wick holder. And I've seen other people use like chopsticks and pencils and things where they tie the extra wick around it and hang it up top when they don't have these. And that works great too, but since we actually have these, we're gonna use one of these. I find it's a little bit easier, a little bit less work. And just like with the bottom, we are not gonna wanna shove this too tightly in here because again, it's sharp metal. It will slice it if we are not careful. So we're gonna pull it taut and then pull it into just enough for it to hold it, like so. And then we're gonna go ahead and make sure that it's nice and even in the middle of our candle. And just like that, it is prepared and ready to go. And if you're gonna make votives, congrats, there you go, you're ready to pour. Okay, so now we have it all set up here. I brought out my little TV tray, which you can see from the wreckage. I use it for pouring candle stuff and catching any spills. Safety first, gonna put some gloves on because these metal things will conduct heat and they're gonna get hecka hot. So we're gonna go ahead and wear our gloves, and if you've got a regular double boiler, this is you're gonna have to like pour it like a pitcher, but since I have one of these vat things, I have a little crank I pull. So I'm gonna get this ready to begin filling. You guys can see. Fill it all the way to the top. And be very careful, guys, because this stuff is gonna be like molten freaking hot. Set that down. And then readjust the wick nice and center. And then we're gonna move on to one of these little guys, which, you know, they're significantly easier to work with. Instead of needing to mess with all the wick and stuff, you just, you know, pop that in there. You get that ready. You'll line it up. Of course, this one's a little bit, there we go. Just like with the big one, you can very carefully fill it all the way up. There we go, and that's that for the little guy. Let's be careful not to send molten stuff everywhere. And now I'm just gonna basically rinse and repeat with all the rest of them. Whew, okay, we are done pouring our candles. Now we need to let them cool. So depending on how you want the finish of your candle to be, first of all, the type of wax that you're using will have an effect on this, and then also how you let them cool down. Now, the 140 beeswax that I am using is a mix that is specifically for modeling. If you want your candle to be modeled, that's that kind of grungier, more rustic look that's what modeling is. And if you don't want that, the more like solid, completely smooth coloration, that's not modeling. This 140 wax that we have is specifically for modeling because I personally love the rustic look. Now, there are certain things, you can use just about any wax to not get modeled. You'll have to add some different things that you pour into the wax as it's melting to keep it from modeling, and you will have to keep it out in room temperature to cool down to keep that from happening. But if that's what you want anyway, which is our case, we don't gotta worry about that. We don't gotta put anything in it, and we actually can speed things along because we are able to put it in the freezer or the fridge and let it quick cool down. This will actually cause more modeling to happen, but as I've mentioned, modeling is a texture that we want to happen for at least these candles. So since we're aiming to model, we are going to put these in the fridge. My recommendation is to put it on a little tray thing with foil so it doesn't leak and make a mess everywhere else in your fridge. That is gonna let us zoom ahead a little bit with some rapid cooling, but even still, we are gonna want to set a timer for 10 minutes, and when that timer goes off, we're gonna grab our handy dandy skewer, and we're gonna use it to poke holes along both sides of the wick, and then we're gonna refill it with more wax. This is actually how we're gonna prevent it from having holes and bubbles and hollow spots in it and make it nice, full, and even. Okay, so here we have our little candles, and this is where the wick is gonna go. Now, it's kind of puckering a little bit. What we're really gonna do, poke a hole, poke a hole. We'll do this on the big ones too, but the big ones need a little bit more time. So now with those holes, we're actually going to refill them. Okay, once these things have fully cooled through, we are gonna start popping them out, and then we will have almost fully complete candles. These ones are super easy. Literally, you just wiggle this a little bit until they come loose, and then pop, just like that. And then you'll just put some pressure here to make it pop out the piece on the bottom. So after we get this piece out the bottom, come here. This is difficult to do with one hand, pardon me. There we go. So we have this, the hole at the bottom. Now basically all we're gonna do is take this and thread it right through the bottom. And then, just like that, congrats. You now have your own homemade votive candle. Okay, now that these have had a chance to fully cool, what we're gonna wanna do is clear out all the stuff that's holding these down at this end. I'm gonna try and unbury from the wax that leaked there. And mind you, you're probably gonna have some wax that escapes during the cooling process because it's just good at doing that. But you can get the putty out of there, and then if you can unearth the plug and also pull that out of there. There we go. And now it should just be the wick that's left here. Now, the interesting part will be getting this out. Now, sometimes like that, they'll slide right out. Sometimes they'll fight you, and if they do fight you, I guess I didn't have to turn it on. Hot water, you can pour hot water around the mold and then try getting it to just spit it out, which apparently did not need to. Now, the part that you were pouring on, the messy, bumpy side, that is gonna be your bottom. And then what was previously the bottom, that is gonna be the top. And then you can see the example of the modeling, which is these cool snowflake looking spot things, which I personally really like the look of that, so I intentionally do it that way. But now we can just trim this wick a little bit better, and I will usually shave the bottom so it's flat, and then bada bing, babadook, we have a spell candle. And there we go, finished candles. And it's nighttime now. That took a little longer than I was expecting for the video, but basically make sure you got a couple hours to do this because it is a little bit time consuming. The light isn't as great now, but I'll pick some up so you can see. They definitely have that handmade look to them, so they're not going to be like factory perfect, but obviously that's not realistic when you are doing a handcrafted item. But they are a color you made yourself, a scent you made yourself. I threw some glitter in there, and basically, next step for me anyway, I'm going to be carving and painting these bad boys. But for some of you, this may be where your journey ends. But here we go with the final result. Alright guys, I hope yours turned out just as well, if not better. This is something that practice makes perfect, or at least better. The more you do it, the easier it's going to become. It's a little bit challenging to pick up at first, I won't lie. I struggled a bit when I did my very first batches, so do not be discouraged if it's not ideal your very first time around. That's just how this kind of stuff goes. But I hope you had fun following along, or at least watching, and maybe you'll learn something with a new skill. Now I have a colossal mess of glitter and wax to begin cleaning up. That's the one downside to this hobby. I'm not looking forward to that. It is a bit messy. One of these days, when I don't have to rent an apartment, I can just buy a house. I'll have a workshop just for my messy crafts like this, like a garage or something. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was entertaining to you. I will catch you all next time with another video, and until then, remember, stay creepy.